I thought the worst day of my life was when I got fired from my first job out of college. I was wrong. The worst day was when I opened that certified letter from my parents' attorney demanding $368,000 for my sister Madison's mortgage payments. My hands shook as I read the legal document stating that my parents had bought her a $400,000 house in suburban Phoenix, then somehow transferred the entire mortgage responsibility to me without my knowledge or consent. When I called my mother that evening, my voice barely steady, she answered on the first ring, like she'd been waiting. Her tone was ice cold as she delivered the blow that shattered my world. You make six figures as a software engineer while Madison struggles as a single mom. Family helps family, Harvey. Pay up, or we'll sue you. The line went dead, leaving me staring at legal papers that threatened to destroy everything I'd worked toward. Growing up in middle-class Tucson, I always knew I was different from my younger sister Madison. While she was the free spirit who could charm her way out of any trouble, I was the responsible older brother who color-coded his homework assignments and saved every dollar from my part-time jobs. Our parents, Robert and Linda, seemed to accept this dynamic early on. Dad worked as a plumber, building a solid reputation around town, while Mom managed the books for his small business. We weren't wealthy, but we were comfortable. Madison and I followed completely different paths after high school. She dropped out of community college after one semester to chase a boyfriend to California, then came back pregnant and heartbroken 6 months later. I, meanwhile, worked 3 jobs to put myself through Arizona State University, graduating with a computer science degree and immediately landing a position at a Phoenix tech startup, making $120,000 annually. I wasn't heartless about Madison's struggles. I genuinely felt bad that life seemed so much harder for her than it was for me. But I also couldn't understand why she kept making the same destructive choices over and over again. When she moved in with Derek, a guy she'd met online who had no steady job and a mysterious past, I tried to warn her. She brushed off my concerns, and our parents told me to mind my own business. 6 months ago, everything seemed to change for the better. Mom called me with exciting news. They had decided to help Madison buy a house in Scottsdale. Madison's relationship with Derek had ended badly, leaving her and her 2 young children, Emma and Jake, essentially homeless. Dad had been putting aside money from some larger plumbing contracts, and they wanted to give Madison a fresh start. I thought it was incredibly generous, especially given their modest retirement savings. When I asked about the details, Mom was vague but cheerful. Don't worry about the finances, honey. We've got it figured out. Madison deserves a chance to give those babies a stable home. I didn't press for more information. It wasn't my money, and frankly, I was relieved that Madison would finally have some stability. Madison moved into the house with great fanfare. Her social media accounts exploded with photos of the beautiful 4-bedroom home with its desert landscaping and sparkling pool. She tagged every post with grateful messages about her amazing parents and her fresh start. I visited once for a family barbecue, noting that the house seemed quite expensive for a teacher and a plumber's retirement income, but I figured they knew what they were doing. I had been focused on my own goals, diligently saving for a down payment on my own home while building my career. My savings account had reached $85,000, and I was planning to start house hunting in the spring. Life felt like it was finally falling into place. Then that certified letter arrived, and I discovered the horrible truth. The legal documents revealed that my parents had used my social security number and forged financial documents to make me the primary mortgage holder for Madison's house. My credit report, which I pulled immediately in panic, showed a $368,000 mortgage that I had never signed for. Worse, my credit score had plummeted from 740 to 590 due to missed payments that Madison should have been making but apparently wasn't. My parents had committed identity theft against their own son. The drive from Phoenix to Tucson had never felt longer. My hands gripped the steering wheel as I replayed my mother's cold words over and over. The desert landscape blurred past my windows as I struggled to understand how the people who raised me could do something so devastating. I had called in sick to work, something I hadn't done in over 2 years, because I knew this confrontation required my full attention. I pulled into my childhood home's driveway, noting how much smaller and shabbier it looked compared to Madison's new house. The irony wasn't lost on me. I walked through the front door without knocking, a privilege of childhood that now felt like a violation given what I'd learned. Dad was sitting at the kitchen table with a cup of coffee and the morning paper, looking for all the world like any other Tuesday morning. When he saw me, his expression hardened into the stubborn mask I remembered from my teenage years. "Harvey, figured you'd show up eventually." "Dad, what the hell did you do?" I set the legal documents on the table between us. "You used my social security number to get Madison a mortgage. That's identity theft. That's a federal crime." He barely glanced at the papers. "Don't be so dramatic. Madison needed help, and you were being selfish, keeping all that money to yourself. We raised you better than that." "Selfish? I worked my butt off for that money. I've been saving for years to buy my own house." Mom walked into the kitchen then, wearing the same disappointed expression she used to give me when I forgot to take out the trash. "Harvey, honey, we thought you'd understand. Madison is struggling as a single mother. You make more money than you know what to do with. Family is supposed to help family. By committing fraud? By stealing my identity? Do you have any idea what you've done to my credit?" Dad slammed his coffee cup down. "We didn't steal anything. We just made sure the mortgage got handled by someone who could actually afford it. Madison can't qualify for that kind of loan on her retail salary. Then she shouldn't have gotten a $400,000 house." The argument escalated quickly, with my parents becoming increasingly defensive and angry. They accused me of being ungrateful for everything they'd given me growing up, of caring more about money than family, of being jealous of Madison's happiness. Nothing I said seemed to penetrate their certainty that they had done the right thing. Finally, I stormed out and drove to Scottsdale to confront Madison directly. I found her at the house, looking exhausted as she tried to wrangle her 2 young children in the beautifully landscaped backyard. Emma was 7, and Jake was 4, both energetic kids who deserve stability. When Madison saw me approaching, her face crumpled. "Harvey, I'm so sorry. I had no idea what Mom and Dad did until yesterday when that lawyer called me." I stopped short. "What lawyer?" "Their lawyer. He wanted to make sure I understood that you were trying to back out of our agreement and that I needed to be prepared to testify about how you promised to help with the house." My stomach dropped. "Madison, I never promised anything. I didn't even know about this mortgage until yesterday." She started crying then, deep sobs that shook her whole body. "I know that now. But Mom and Dad told me you had agreed to co-sign and help with the payments. They said you wanted to make sure Emma and Jake had a stable home, but you wanted to keep it quiet because you didn't want other family members asking for help. And you believe that?" "I wanted to believe it," she whispered. "Harvey, I've been struggling so much. The payments on this place are $2,400 a month. I make $28,000 a year at Target. Even with Mom and Dad's help, I can barely keep the lights on." I sat down heavily on one of the patio chairs. "How long have you been behind on payments?" 3 months. The foreclosure notices started coming last week." She wiped her eyes with the back of her hand. "I thought you knew. I thought you were okay with me being late because you understood how hard things have been." That's when she dropped the second bomb. "Harvey, there's more. Mom and Dad told me you were going to help with my credit card debt too, and my car payments, and maybe some money for the kids' expenses. They showed me text messages where they said you had agreed to all of it." I felt the blood drain from my face. "What text messages?" Madison pulled out her phone and showed me a series of messages supposedly from me, discussing monthly support payments totaling over $3,000 beyond the mortgage. The phone number was mine, but I had never sent those messages. "Madison, I didn't send these. Someone faked them." She stared at the phone, then at me, and I saw the horrible realization dawn on her face. "Oh God, Harvey, what have they done to us?" I realized then that this wasn't just about a house. My parents had been systematically planning to transfer Madison's entire financial burden to me, making me responsible not just for her mortgage but for supporting her entire lifestyle. And they had made Madison complicit by convincing her I was a willing participant in their scheme. Patricia Williams had the kind of office that inspired confidence. Floor-to-ceiling law books, diplomas from prestigious universities, and a desk that had clearly seen decades of important decisions. She was a specialist in financial crimes, recommended by a friend who worked in banking. As she reviewed my case files, her expression grew increasingly grim. "Harvey, What your parents did is serious felony-level identity theft. The mortgage fraud alone carries potential prison time. But proving your innocence is going to be expensive and time-consuming. She explained that even though I had a strong case, the damage to my credit was immediate and devastating. I had already been denied for a credit card increase, and my auto insurance company had raised my rates after checking my credit score. The fraudulent mortgage would remain on my credit report until I could legally prove it wasn't mine. The worst part, Patricia continued, is that your parents seem to be doubling down. They've retained Marcus Thompson, and he's aggressive. He specializes in civil litigation and has already filed a lawsuit claiming you verbally agreed to take responsibility for Madison's mortgage. I stared at the legal papers she handed me, but I never agreed to anything. They're claiming you did, and they've produced what appears to be evidence: text messages, emails, even a supposed recording of a phone conversation. We'll need to prove all of that is fabricated. The lawsuit demanded $368,000 in immediate payment plus damages for breach of family contract and intentional infliction of emotional distress. Reading it made me feel sick. My own parents were suing me for nearly $500,000. Things got worse when the local media picked up the story. A reporter had somehow gotten wind of the lawsuit and ran a piece titled, "Family Sues Successful Son for Refusing to Support Struggling Sister." The article painted me as a heartless tech worker who made six figures but refused to help his sister and her children avoid homelessness. My phone started ringing constantly with interview requests and comments from strangers who had seen the story online. Someone had posted my work information, and my employer started receiving calls from reporters asking for comment about my family values and whether my alleged behavior reflected the company's culture. My relationship with Sarah, the teacher I'd been dating for 8 months, became strained almost immediately. She had met my family only twice, but she'd liked them and thought we had a close relationship. When she read the news coverage, she started asking pointed questions about why I was really refusing to help Madison. "Harvey, I don't understand. You make good money, and Madison is struggling with 2 kids. Why wouldn't you want to help her?" I tried to explain about the identity theft and forgery, but the fake evidence my parents had produced looked convincing. The text messages appeared to come from my phone. The emails had my correct signature. Even I had to admit it looked bad from the outside. "Sarah, they stole my identity. I never agreed to any of this." But I could see doubt in her eyes. "Your own parents? Harvey? Why would they risk going to prison just to trick you into helping Madison? Maybe you did agree, and now you're having second thoughts." The worst part was discovering the true scope of the fraud. Patricia's investigation revealed that my parents had been using my identity for other transactions over the past 2 years. There were credit cards I'd never applied for, a loan against their house that somehow had my name on it, and even a car lease for Madison's Honda that I supposedly co-signed. "Your total fraudulent debt exposure is over $500,000, Patricia told me during our second meeting. "Even if we win the mortgage case, you could still face bankruptcy trying to clean up the rest of this mess." I sat in her office, staring at a spreadsheet that listed debts I'd never incurred, watching my entire financial future crumble. I had worked so hard to build a stable life, and now I faced losing everything because my own parents had systematically destroyed my credit and stolen my identity. The irony was devastating. I had always been the responsible one, the one who planned ahead and made smart decisions. Madison had been the one who made impulsive choices and faced constant financial crises. Now, through no fault of my own, I was facing financial ruin while she lived in a $400,000 house that I was somehow supposed to pay for. 3 weeks into the legal battle, Patricia Williams called me with news that made my blood run cold. Her investigation had uncovered a conspiracy far more elaborate than simple family fraud. "Harvey, we need to meet immediately. What I've found changes everything." In her office, she spread out bank records, phone logs, and surveillance photos that told a story I couldn't have imagined. My parents hadn't acted alone. Derek, Madison's ex-boyfriend, whom I thought was out of the picture, had been orchestrating the entire scheme from behind the scenes. "Derek Martinez has a criminal record for financial fraud in 3 states, Patricia explained, sliding his rap sheet across her desk. He was convicted of identity theft in Nevada 2 years ago and served 18 months in prison. He's been living at Madison's house this entire time, despite her claims that their relationship ended. The surveillance photos showed Derek coming and going from Madison's house at all hours. Bank records revealed that he had been accessing accounts in my name using forged documents and stolen personal information. He hadn't just coached my parents on identity theft techniques. He had turned them into accomplices in a larger fraud operation. It gets worse, Patricia continued. Derek has been intercepting your mail. Remember when you updated your address with the DMV but forgot to change it with your bank? Your statements have been going to your parents' house for 2 years. Derek has been collecting them, studying your financial patterns, and building a complete profile of your assets. I felt sick as the pieces fell into place. Derek had spent months, maybe years, planning this fraud. He had convinced my parents that I was selfish for not helping Madison, then provided them with the tools and knowledge to steal from me. He had made them believe they were saving their daughter while he positioned himself to profit from the entire scheme. My credit situation had become a nightmare. I couldn't get approved for an apartment rental because of my damaged credit score. My car insurance company had tripled my rates. Most devastating of all, my employer had placed me on administrative leave pending the resolution of the legal issues. The company couldn't risk being associated with someone facing federal fraud charges, even as a victim. There's something else, Patricia said grimly. Derek has been using your identity to apply for business loans in Phoenix. He's attempted to secure over $200,000 in additional credit using fake financial documents that show you as a successful entrepreneur looking to expand operations. Without my job, I couldn't afford Patricia's legal fees. My savings were draining fast, and I was getting collection calls for debts I'd never incurred. Credit card companies that Derek had fraudulently signed me up for were demanding payment on maxed-out cards I'd never seen. Then Sarah delivered the final blow. She came to my apartment on a Thursday evening, looking uncomfortable and distant. "Harvey, I need to tell you something. Your parents contacted me." My heart stopped. "They what?" "They called me yesterday and asked to meet for coffee. They showed me evidence that you've been lying to me about this whole situation." She pulled out printed emails and text messages. "They have proof that you promised to help Madison and then backed out when you realized how much money was involved." I grabbed the papers, recognizing immediately that they were more fabricated evidence. But they were sophisticated fakes, complete with email headers and timestamp data that would convince anyone who wasn't looking for signs of forgery. "Sarah, these are fake. My parents are working with a convicted fraudster who's been stealing my identity for years." But I could see she had already made up her mind. "Harvey, your own parents risked their retirement savings to help Madison. Why would they lie about this? And why would they involve lawyers and courts if you hadn't actually promised to help?" She left that night, and I knew our relationship was over. Derek and my parents had successfully isolated me from everyone who might support me, painting me as a liar and manipulator while they posed as the real victims. The next morning brought the most devastating news yet. Patricia called to tell me that Derek had been using my identity to file insurance claims from a minor car accident I'd been in the previous year. The insurance company had paid out $12,000 to an account in my name that Derek controlled. "Harvey, this is now a multi-state federal case. The FBI is going to want to interview you as both a victim and a potential suspect. Derek's fraud operation extends far beyond your family situation." But for the first time since this nightmare began, I felt something besides despair. I felt anger, pure, focused rage at the people who had betrayed me so completely. They had underestimated me, thinking I would just roll over and pay rather than fight back. They were about to learn how wrong they were. The motel room on the outskirts of Phoenix smelled like disinfectant and cigarettes, a far cry from my comfortable apartment that I could no longer afford. I had been forced to move out when my landlord refused to renew my lease, citing the federal investigation and my damaged credit as liability concerns. My belongings sat in a storage unit that I paid for with my dwindling savings, while I lived out of 2 suitcases and tried to figure out how to rebuild my life. My phone rang constantly with collection calls from credit card companies demanding payment on accounts Derek had opened in my name. Each time I explained that I was a victim of identity theft, The representatives would ask for police report numbers and case references that were still being processed. Meanwhile, the interest and late fees continued to accumulate on debts I had never incurred. The worst part was the isolation. Extended family members had started calling, not to offer support, but to demand explanations for my selfish behavior. My Aunt Carol, whom I'd always respected, left a voicemail that cut deep. "Harvey, I'm disappointed in you. Madison is family, and those babies need a stable home. How can you be so cruel to your own sister?" My parents had orchestrated a campaign of character assassination, reaching out to every relative and family friend to share their version of events. They painted themselves as desperate grandparents trying to save their daughter and grandchildren from homelessness, while I was the successful but heartless son who had promised help then cruelly withdrawn it. Patricia Williams had become more than just my attorney. She was my lifeline to sanity. During our weekly meetings, she updated me on the FBI investigation that was slowly but steadily building a case against Derek's fraud network. "Special Agent Jennifer Martinez is leading the investigation," Patricia explained. "Derek's operation extends across multiple states and involves dozens of victims. Your case is actually helping them uncover a much larger conspiracy." Agent Martinez was a sharp woman in her 40s who specialized in financial crimes. When we met at the FBI field office, she explained that Derek was part of an organized identity theft ring that had been operating across the Southwest for over 3 years. "Mr. Thompson, your parents may have been victims as much as accomplices," Agent Martinez said. "Derek is extremely skilled at psychological manipulation. He identifies families with financial stress and convinces them that fraud is justified to help their loved ones." But this revelation, while somewhat comforting, didn't solve my immediate problems. My credit was still destroyed, my career was still on hold, and I was still facing a civil lawsuit demanding hundreds of thousands of dollars. Then Madison reached out secretly, asking to meet at a coffee shop in Scottsdale. She looked terrible, thin, exhausted, with dark circles under her eyes that suggested she hadn't been sleeping well. "Harvey, I need to tell you something, and I need you to promise you won't go to the police until I figure out how to protect Emma and Jake." My stomach dropped. "Madison, what's wrong?" "Derek never left. He's been living in the house this whole time, and he's been threatening me. He said if I cooperate with your investigation or tell anyone he's there, something bad will happen to the kids." She pulled out her phone and showed me text messages that made my blood run cold. Derek had sent her photos of Emma and Jake at school, at the playground, at their daycare. The message was clear. He knew where to find them at all times. "He's been using the house as headquarters for whatever he's really doing," Madison continued, her voice shaking. "There are always strange men coming and going, and they have meetings in the garage where I'm not allowed to go. He told me the house isn't really about helping me. It's about having a legitimate address for his business operations." I reached across the table and took her hand. "Madison, you and the kids are in danger. We need to get you out of there." "I can't. He controls everything now. My car is in his name, my phone is on a plan he pays for, and he's convinced Mom and Dad that I'm happy and that you're the problem. If I try to leave, he'll hurt Emma and Jake to punish me." She started crying then, quiet tears that broke my heart. "Harvey, I'm so sorry. I was desperate and scared, and when Mom and Dad said you wanted to help, I didn't question it because I needed it to be true. I never wanted any of this to happen to you." For the first time since this nightmare began, I felt like I had my sister back. The real Madison, not the manipulated victim that Derek and our parents had created. "We're going to fix this," I told her. "But I need you to be brave and help me gather evidence." That night, I called Patricia and Agent Martinez. If Derek was running a criminal operation out of Madison's house, we needed to document everything. And if he was threatening children to maintain control, the FBI needed to act fast. But I also knew this was my chance to finally fight back. Derek thought he had isolated me completely, destroyed all my relationships, and left me powerless. He was about to discover that he had only made me more dangerous. My lowest moment came later that week when I drove past my childhood home and saw Derek's car in the driveway. Through the window, I could see him sitting at our kitchen table with my parents, all three of them poring over documents and planning their next moves. Derek looked up and saw me, then had the audacity to smile and wave. That night, in my dingy motel room, I made a decision that would change everything. I wasn't going to just defend myself anymore. I was going to destroy Derek's entire operation and make sure everyone who had betrayed me faced the consequences of their actions. The war was about to begin. Agent Martinez listened intently as I proposed wearing a wire to confront my parents and Derek directly. We were sitting in an unmarked FBI vehicle outside a Starbucks in Scottsdale, planning what could be the most important conversation of my life. "Harvey, I need you to understand the risks," she said, adjusting the recording equipment. "Derek is dangerous, and cornered criminals can be unpredictable. If you feel threatened at any point, you get out immediately." Patricia Williams had argued against this plan, preferring to let the FBI investigation proceed without putting me in potential danger. But I knew that Derek was too smart to incriminate himself unless he felt completely confident and in control. He needed to see me as defeated and desperate. "He thinks he's won," I told Agent Martinez. "He's destroyed my job, my relationship, my family, and my credit. In his mind, I'm just a broken victim who might finally agree to pay up rather than keep fighting. That arrogance is going to be his downfall." The plan was simple but risky. I would go to my parents' house and offer to negotiate a settlement, wearing a wire to record any admissions about the identity theft and fraud. Agent Martinez and her team would be positioned nearby, ready to move in if things went wrong. Madison had agreed to help by texting Derek that I had called her, begging for a meeting to discuss, making this all go away. She told him I seemed broken and ready to give up, which was exactly what we wanted him to believe. I drove to my parents' house on a Saturday afternoon, my heart pounding as I saw Derek's silver Infiniti in the driveway. The car was another piece of evidence. Madison had told me Derek claimed to be unemployed, but he was driving a $60,000 vehicle that was somehow registered in my name. My father answered the door with a surprised expression that quickly turned suspicious. "Harvey, what do you want?" "I want to talk. All of us, including Derek." Dad hesitated, then stepped aside to let me in. The house felt different now, contaminated by the betrayal that had taken place within its walls. Derek was sitting at the kitchen table with my mother, both of them looking up as I entered. "Well, well," Derek said with that same smug smile I'd seen through the window. "The prodigal son returns. Finally ready to do right by your family?" I sat down across from him, forcing myself to appear defeated and desperate. "I can't keep fighting this. It's destroying my life. Maybe we can work something out." My mother's expression softened slightly. "Harvey, honey, we never wanted it to come to this. We just needed you to understand that family has to stick together." "I understand that now," I lied. "But $368,000 is a lot of money. I don't have that kind of cash." Derek leaned forward, and I could see the predatory gleam in his eyes. "Here's what you're going to do, Harvey. You're going to take out a loan against your 401k, liquidate your savings, and come up with $200,000 as a good faith payment. Then we'll work out a payment plan for the rest." "What about my credit? The identity theft has destroyed my score." "What identity theft?" Derek laughed. "You agreed to help Madison. We've got proof. Text messages, emails, recorded phone calls. You can claim identity theft all you want, but the evidence says otherwise." I pretended to look confused and desperate, but I don't remember agreeing to any of this. That's when Derek made his first major mistake. "Of course you don't remember. You were drunk when we had that phone conversation. Robert here can tell you called on a Friday night, slurring your words, going on and on about how successful you were and how you wanted to help Madison buy a house." My father nodded eagerly. "You kept saying you had more money than you knew what to do with and that Madison deserved a break." But I had never called my parents drunk. I rarely drank at all, and certainly never to the point of being unable to remember important conversations. Derek had just admitted to fabricating the entire story. "The thing is, Harvey," Derek continued, his confidence growing, "we've been planning this for a long time. Your parents have been saving your mail, learning about your finances, setting everything up perfectly. Linda's been practicing your signature for months." My mother looked uncomfortable, but didn't contradict him. "We only did what we had to do to help Madison. And it's worked beautifully," Derek added. "We've got a legitimate address for our operations, Madison's taken care of, and you're about to pay for everything whether you like it or not. I pushed a little further. What operations? Derek's eyes narrowed slightly, but his arrogance won out. Let's just say the house serves multiple purposes. Madison provides the perfect cover for a lot of business activities that nosy neighbors might otherwise question. What if I can't come up with the money? Then we proceed with the lawsuit and make sure everyone knows what kind of person you really are, my father said. Your employer, your neighbors, everyone in your social circle. We'll destroy your reputation so completely that you'll never recover. Derek nodded. Plus, there might be some unfortunate accidents. You know, break-ins, identity theft, that kind of thing. Amazing how much damage someone can do when they have all your personal information. There it was, a clear threat of violence and additional criminal activity, all recorded on the wire I was wearing. I pretended to consider their demands for a few more minutes, getting them to repeat key details about the forged signatures, the mail interception, and their plans for ongoing fraud. Derek became increasingly boastful, describing how easy it had been to manipulate my parents and how many other families he'd victimized using similar schemes. Finally, I stood up. I need some time to figure out how to get the money. You've got 48 hours, Derek said. After that, things get complicated. I walked out of that house, knowing I had everything the FBI needed to destroy Derek's operation and hold my parents accountable for their crimes. The recorded conversation contained confessions to identity theft, mortgage fraud, forgery, mail theft, conspiracy, and criminal threats. Agent Martinez was waiting for me at the predetermined location 2 blocks away. As she listened to the recording, her expression grew more satisfied with each admission. Within 6 hours, the FBI had obtained warrants for arrests and searches. Derek was taken into custody at Madison's house, where agents discovered a sophisticated identity theft operation complete with stolen mail, forged documents, and evidence linking him to fraud cases across 4 states. My parents were arrested that evening at their home. The look of shock and betrayal on their faces when the FBI agents read them their rights was something I'll never forget. They had truly believed they were the victims in this situation, right up until the handcuffs clicked shut. The civil trial proceeded quickly once the criminal evidence became public. Derek's attorney tried to maintain the fiction that I had verbally agreed to the mortgage, but Patricia Williams systematically dismantled their case. Judge Catherine Rodriguez had clearly done her homework before the hearing. She listened patiently as Marcus Thompson, my parents' attorney, presented his fabricated evidence and coached testimony. Then Judge Rodriguez asked the question that ended everything. Mr. Thompson, you claim your client's son verbally agreed to assume this mortgage responsibility. Can you provide one witness who heard this conversation other than your clients and Mr. Martinez, who is currently facing federal charges for fraud? Thompson stammered and shuffled through his papers, but couldn't produce any legitimate witness. Every piece of evidence he had presented was either fabricated by Derek or based on testimony from people who were now facing criminal charges themselves. Furthermore, Judge Rodriguez continued, the FBI investigation has revealed that the supposed phone conversation where this agreement was made never actually occurred. Phone records show no such call took place, and the recording submitted as evidence has been forensically proven to be fabricated. She dismissed the lawsuit with prejudice and ordered my parents to pay my attorney fees and damages for filing a fraudulent lawsuit. More importantly, she ordered immediate correction of all credit reports and financial records, plus monetary compensation for the damage to my reputation and career. Walking out of that courthouse, I felt like I could breathe freely for the first time in months. Justice hadn't just been served. It had been delivered with precision and finality. The sentencing hearing took place on a crisp December morning in federal court. Derek sat at the defendant's table in an orange jumpsuit, his former smugness replaced by the hollow expression of a man facing serious prison time. Judge Michael Harrison had reviewed all the evidence from Derek's fraud operation, which had ultimately victimized over 40 families across 5 states. Mr. Martinez, Judge Harrison said, your operation was sophisticated, ruthless, and devastating to numerous families. You targeted people in vulnerable situations and turned family members against each other for profit. The court sentences you to 12 years in federal prison, followed by 5 years of supervised probation. Derek's conviction on charges of conspiracy, identity theft, wire fraud, and racketeering meant he would serve his time in federal prison with limited possibility of early release. Agent Martinez told me later that Derek's arrest had helped the FBI dismantle an entire network of identity thieves operating throughout the Southwest. My parents faced their own reckoning the following week. Robert received 4 years in federal prison, while Linda was sentenced to 3 years due to her cooperation with investigators and her genuine remorse. They had both pleaded guilty to conspiracy and identity theft charges, finally acknowledging the scope of what they had done. The moment that haunts me most from their sentencing was when my mother looked at me across the courtroom, tears streaming down her face, and mouthed, "I'm sorry." I nodded, not ready to forgive but willing to acknowledge that Derek had manipulated them as much as he had manipulated everyone else. With the criminal cases resolved and my credit fully restored, my employer reinstated me with a promotion to senior software engineer. The company's human resources director personally apologized for the administrative leave, explaining that they had to protect the organization while the investigation was ongoing. My new salary of $145,000 annually was a welcome relief after months of financial uncertainty. The settlement from the fraud case provided me with enough money to not only buy my own home but to purchase something larger and nicer than I had originally planned. I found a beautiful 3-bedroom house in Tempe with a pool and mountain views. Everything I had dreamed of when I was saving for that original down payment that felt like a lifetime ago. Madison's journey to recovery was slower but steadier than I had hoped. With Derek in prison and the immediate threat to her children removed, she was able to think clearly for the first time in years. She enrolled in community college with my help in navigating financial aid applications, pursuing a nursing degree that would give her real career prospects. I helped her find affordable housing in a safe neighborhood, and we worked together to establish healthy boundaries in our relationship. Madison had to learn that accepting help didn't mean giving up control, while I had to learn that protecting someone didn't mean solving all their problems for them. "Harvey, I want you to know that I understand now," she told me during one of our weekly coffee meetings. "Derek didn't just steal your money. He stole our relationship. He made me complicit in hurting you, and I'll never forgive myself for that. Madison, you were a victim too. The important thing is that we're building something real now, based on honesty instead of manipulation." Her children, Emma and Jake, were resilient in the way that children often are. They adjusted to their new life with remarkable grace, and I enjoyed being the uncle who helped with homework and took them to movies, rather than the uncle who was somehow financially responsible for their entire existence. Sarah reached out to me 6 months after Derek's arrest, having finally learned the full truth about what had happened. She left a voicemail that was equal parts apology and explanation. "Harvey, I'm so sorry I doubted you. I can't imagine how it felt to have everyone turn against you when you were the victim. I let Derek and your parents manipulate me, and I should have trusted you instead." We met for dinner at a restaurant we used to frequent, and she seemed genuinely horrified by the scope of the deception. "When I think about how convinced I was that you were lying, it scares me. Derek was so persuasive, and the evidence looked so real. Sarah, I don't blame you for doubting. From the outside, it did look like I was the one in the wrong. Derek was a professional manipulator who had perfected his techniques on dozens of families. We dated casually for a few months, rebuilding trust slowly, but ultimately decided that we worked better as friends. The experience had changed both of us, and we wanted different things from a relationship now. She needed someone who could offer more emotional openness, while I needed someone who would trust me, even when circumstances looked suspicious. My experience fighting Derek's fraud operation led me to start a blog called Family Financial Fraud Survivors that became a resource for other victims of identity theft perpetrated by relatives. The site received thousands of visits from people sharing similar stories of financial manipulation by family members. I began speaking at conferences about identity theft protection, working with legislators to strengthen penalties for family fraud crimes, and consulting with law enforcement agencies on techniques for investigating these cases. The work was deeply satisfying, turning my painful experience into something that could help others. One of the most meaningful speaking engagements was at a financial literacy workshop for college students. I talked about protecting personal information, monitoring credit reports, and recognizing the warning signs of financial manipulation by trusted individuals. The hardest lesson I learned, I told the audience, is that the people most likely to steal your identity are the ones closest to you. Not because they're necessarily bad people, but because they have access to your personal information and they can rationalize their actions as helping family. The legal victory had given me more than just financial compensation. It had validated everything I believed about right and wrong, about the importance of honesty and personal responsibility. Judge Rodriguez's decision sent a clear message that family relationships don't justify fraud, and that love expressed through manipulation and theft isn't love at all. My relationship with extended family gradually improved as the truth about Derek's manipulation became widely known. Aunt Carol, who had left that harsh voicemail months earlier, sent me a handwritten letter of apology along with a batch of homemade cookies. Family gatherings were awkward at first, but relatives slowly began reaching out to rebuild connections that Derek's lies had damaged. The house in Tempe became my sanctuary, a place where I could process everything that had happened while building something positive for the future. I installed a home office where I worked on the blog and prepared speaking presentations, turning the spare bedroom into a space where Madison's children could stay overnight when she needed a break. On moving day, Sarah and Madison's children helped me carry boxes from the moving truck, symbolizing the healthy relationships I had built from the ashes of the toxic ones Derek had destroyed. Madison presented me with a handwritten letter that I've kept framed in my office. Harvey, it read, I can't undo the pain I caused by believing Derek's lies and letting our parents manipulate me. But I can promise you that I've learned the difference between accepting help and being dependent, between family loyalty and family exploitation. Thank you for fighting for the truth even when it would have been easier to just pay and move on. You saved not just yourself, but all of us. The most important lesson from this entire ordeal was learning to distinguish between helping family and enabling destructive behavior. True family support means encouraging independence and growth, not creating dependency and resentment. It means setting boundaries that protect everyone involved, not sacrificing one person's well-being for another's convenience. I also learned the importance of protecting my identity and monitoring my credit regularly, even from trusted family members. The experience taught me that financial fraud often begins with small violations of trust that escalate over time when left unchecked. Most significantly, I discovered that my own integrity was worth fighting for, even when the entire world seemed to be against me. Standing up for the truth, even when it meant losing relationships and facing serious financial consequences, ultimately led to a stronger, more authentic life built on genuine connections rather than manipulation and obligation. The story ends not with revenge or bitterness, but with genuine healing and growth for everyone involved. Madison is building a real career and raising her children with honesty and independence. My parents are facing the consequences of their actions but also receiving counseling to understand how Derek manipulated them. Derek himself is paying for his crimes but also receiving rehabilitation services that might prevent him from victimizing other families in the future. As for me, I'm living in my dream house, excelling in my career, helping other fraud victims and building relationships based on mutual respect rather than financial obligation. The pain of betrayal has been transformed into wisdom, strength, and a deeper appreciation for authentic human connections. Have you ever faced a situation where doing the right thing seemed to make everything worse before it got better? How do you protect yourself from financial manipulation while still being generous with the people you love? I'd love to hear your thoughts and experiences in the comments below. If this story resonated with you or helped you understand financial fraud better, please give it a like to help others find it. Subscribe to hear more stories about overcoming family financial manipulation and standing up for what's right. And please share this with anyone who might be facing similar challenges. Sometimes knowing you're not alone makes all the difference in finding the courage to fight back. Thank you for listening to my story, and I hope it helps you build stronger, healthier relationships based on honesty and mutual respect, rather than financial obligation and family guilt.